Welcome to another deep dive. We are tackling the Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist for 2025.
Okay.
16 books, all vying for the top spot.
That's right.
And this time around, we're going to be using a video reaction from Shelley Swearingen. She's a booktuber.
Yeah. Good.
And she just did like a first impressions kind of gut reaction to the long list announcement.
Right.
So that'll kind of be our jumping off point. But we are going to, of course, be doing what we do here, which is like dig a little deeper into the themes and maybe debate some points along the way.
Sounds good.
And hopefully help you decide which ones you might want to add to your TBR.
Absolutely. And I think what makes this year so interesting is the huge number of debut novelists on the long list.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, 9 out of the 16 are first-time authors.
Wow.
Which really does seem to suggest a potential shift in the literary landscape.
It really feels like a wave of fresh voices, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So speaking of fresh voices, let's start with one that's already making waves. The Safe Keep by Jelle van der Wooten. This is the only one that Shelley had actually read before the long list came out.
That's right. And The Safe Keep was also shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year.
Oh, wow.
So it's one that's definitely attracting a lot of attention already.
Yeah, and it's historical fiction set in post-World War II England.
Yeah, it focuses on a protagonist who is kind of forced to share her family home with this unexpected guest. And it leads to, as you might imagine, a lot of drama.
Right, and Shelley actually drew comparisons to Sarah Waters.
Okay.
Which makes sense, given the historical setting and, potential for some gothic undertones there. Mm-hmm. But, she didn't say she was, totally blown away by it, but obviously it resonated with the judges enough to make it onto this list.
Right.
So, I guess that speaks to how subjective literary tastes can be.
Absolutely, and that's what makes these prizes so fascinating. Different perspectives bring different books to the forefront.
Yeah.
So, shall we move on to a couple of authors that Shelley's already familiar with?
Yes.
Okay, so starting with Elizabeth Strout and her new novel, Tell Me Everything.
Okay, so this one is interesting because it's actually part of Strout's ongoing Amgash series, meaning that there is sort of some required background knowledge in order to fully appreciate the story.
Okay.
And it actually connects back to her Olive Kitteridge novels,
All right.
which Shelley admitted she hasn't read yet, but she is a big fan of the Lucy Barton books.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this raises an interesting question for the listener. Does a book's position within a series make it more or less appealing to you?
That's a great point. Some readers love diving into a familiar world.
Right.
While others might feel intimidated or even a little bit lost jumping in, midway through a saga.
Yeah.
It really depends on your personal reading style.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of established authors, we also have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Dream Country on the list.
Yes.
And this one is contemporary.
Right.
It follows a Nigerian travel writer who is living in America.
Okay.
And it's set amidst the backdrop of the pandemic.
Oh, interesting.
And she finds herself, reflecting on past relationships and choices and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've seen this kind of surge of pandemic-inspired literature lately, haven't we?
We have, and I think it really reflects a broader trend of authors kind of using fiction to grapple with these recent global events and, how they impact individual lives.
Right.
It's a way of processing this sort of collective trauma and searching for meaning in times of uncertainty.
Right. Shelley did mention some controversy surrounding Adichie.
Okay.
Although she didn't really go into specifics. And regardless, she kind of admitted that she's more drawn to Adichie's earlier work, like Americana.
Right. So sometimes a proven track record can be more enticing than a brand new release.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of readers can relate to that feeling, right? There's a sense of comfort in knowing an author's style and what to expect.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean we should, dismiss new works outright.
Of course not.
Sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone leads to the most rewarding reading experiences.
That's very true.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about some books that Shelley has already deemed hard passes.
Oh, okay.
So first up we have Men, the Ministry of Time by Colleen Bradley.
Okay.
This is a debut,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got a time travel element.
Right.
But from what I gathered from Shelley's description, it sounds like maybe a little chaotic or potentially confusing.
It's always interesting how much, critical reception influences our reading choices, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Negative reviews can be a total deterrent for some, while others are intrigued by something that's causing these really strong reactions.
Right, even if they're negative.
Right.
It's like that saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, maybe not always, but it definitely can spark curiosity.
Yeah.
So Shelley's second no-go is All Four Is by Miranda July.
Okay.
And this is about, like, a middle-aged woman on a road trip.
Okay.
Who ends up having an affair with a younger man. And the premise itself didn't really strike Shelley as anything like particularly groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And she also admitted she's not really a fan of Miranda July's previous work.
Okay.
So, it brings up that point again, like how much does an author's previous work influence our perception of their new releases?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something to consider.
Yeah, for sure.
If you've loved an author's earlier books, you're much more inclined to give their latest offering a go, whereas a negative experience might make you a little hesitant.
For sure. Okay, so now let's delve into a group of books that Shelley was interested in, but they're currently unavailable to her because she's on a self-imposed book buying ban.
Oh, I see.
Which she mentioned in the video. She's trying to, save money and be more mindful.
Mm-hmm. The struggles of a book lover on a budget.
Right.
It's this tantalizing torture of seeing all these really intriguing titles, but having to exercise some restraint.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So the first one that caught her eye is Good Girl by Aria Abra. And this is a coming-of-age story set in Berlin about a young woman who's navigating grief and finding solace in the grunge scene.
Oh, wow.
What I found particularly interesting about this one is that Abra is actually an award-winning poet.
Okay.
So that makes me wonder how that poetic sensibility will translate into prose.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think lyrical language enhances a novel, or sometimes can it hinder the plot development?
That's a great question, and there's really no easy answer.
Right.
Sometimes lyrical prose can create this truly immersive reading experience, adding these layers of depth and beauty to the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also be very distracting or even feel pretentious if it's not done well.
Right. It's all about finding that delicate balance.
Yes.
Between artistry and accessibility.
For sure.
Okay, the next one on Shelley's unavailable list is Amma by Sarit Delva.
Okay.
This immediately grabbed my attention with just how powerful the premise is.
Tell me about it.
It starts with a 10-year-old girl
in
1951 Singapore who takes a pretty drastic step to escape abuse.
Oh, my God.
And then it explores the kind of ripple effects of this trauma on her family.
Okay.
So it's heavy subject matter.
Definitely.
But I'm always drawn to stories that delve into those kind of, like, complexities of human resilience and the enduring power of family secrets,
Absolutely. Those are always page turners.
Yeah.
What did you find most interesting about this one?
What I thought was really interesting was that Delva's actually a playwright.
Oh, what?
So that makes me think there might be a certain, like, dramatic flair present in her writing. And I'm curious to see how she adapts her storytelling skills from the stage to the page.
That's a really cool transition.
Yeah.
I'm always curious to see how authors with those different backgrounds bring their unique perspectives to the novel form.
Yes, for sure. Okay, speaking of different backgrounds, we have Rosanna Pike.
Oh, wow.
The actress.
Yeah.
She has a book on the list.
Okay.
A Little Trickery.
Interesting.
And it takes us back in time to Tudor-era England. Oh. And it features a strong-willed protagonist named Tib, who learns from her mother how to defy societal expectations.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Shelley did say that she loves historical fiction.
Yeah.
But she wasn't totally convinced by this one just based on the synopsis alone.
Right. Sometimes a premise, even if it checks all the boxes, doesn't spark that immediate excitement.
Right.
It's just that elusive je ne sais quoi that draws us to certain stories.
Totally.
Maybe when she reads it, she'll change her mind.
Right. Maybe so. Okay, so let's talk about one that seems perfectly suited for like a cozy afternoon.
Right.
Read The Artist by Lucy Steads.
Okay.
This one is set in a remote farmhouse in 1920s Provence.
Lovely.
And it centers on a young woman named Eddie, who is dedicated to supporting her genius uncle's artistic endeavors. But of course, there's some family secrets that she uncovers along the way.
The setting and the premise just sounds so conducive to a really contemplative, atmospheric kind of reading experience.
Yeah.
I can almost picture the rolling hills of Provence, those sun-drenched fields of lavender.
Yeah.
It sounds like the kind of book you just want to savor slowly.
I agree.
And just immerse yourself in the world.
Totally, totally. Okay, now buckle up for this next one, Fundamentally by Nesaba Giannis.
Okay.
This premise is very intriguing and potentially controversial.
All right, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It follows Nadia, a woman with a strict upbringing.
Okay.
And after a breakup, she takes a job in Iraq.
Okay.
Rehabilitating ISIS women.
Oh, wow.
And she forms this really unexpected friendship with one of the women that she's tasked with deprogramming.
Interesting.
So it creates this really complex dynamic that explores themes of radicalization, rehabilitation, and the possibility of connection amidst, incredibly challenging circumstances.
Yeah.
What strikes you about this premise?
I mean, honestly, everything. The setting is so unusual. The exploration of radicalization and rehabilitation, the potential for like a really powerful story of connection. It's incredibly compelling.
Yeah, it's definitely one I'm adding to my to-read list.
It seems like a book that will definitely spark conversations and challenge our preconceived notions about good and evil.
Right.
Forgiveness and redemption.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so speaking of challenging notions, let's move on to a group of books by seasoned authors.
Okay.
Whose work might not be as readily accessible to Shelley.
Okay.
So the first one is Birding by Rose Ron.
Okay.
And this one delves into the complexities of unreliable narrators and unhealthy relationships, specifically women trying to break free from these kind of toxic patterns.
Interesting.
Shelley actually drew a comparison to a book that came out a few years ago called Salt Lick,
Okay.
which had a similar concept, but she felt the execution was a bit flawed.
I see.
So it's fascinating, right? How past reading experiences can really shake our expectations.
Oh, yeah.
And even biases towards certain types of books or authors.
Totally.
Have you ever found yourself hesitant to try a book because it reminded you of something you disliked in the past?
Oh.
Yeah, it's like our reading brains have developed their own, internal warning system.
Exactly.
Moving on, we have Crooked Seeds by Karen Jennings.
Okay.
She's a South African author with an impressive 7 books under her belt.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know.
Yeah.
So this one is set in a near future Cape Town, 2028.
Okay.
And it centers on a woman whose brother's alleged involvement in a terrorist group decades earlier comes back to haunt her.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought the choice to set the story in the near future was intriguing.
Yeah, for sure.
It suggests that the past isn't easily buried.
Right.
And that the repercussions can continue to sort of reverberate through time.
Yeah.
Shaping the present and even the future.
Makes you think about Jennings's vision of South Africa in 2028 as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, will it be a world drastically different from our own?
Right.
Or will it reflect the same social and political tensions, just amplified?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm always fascinated by how authors use these near future settings to comment on present day issues and to explore those potential trajectories for society.
It's a way of prompting us to think critically about the choices we're making now, right?
Totally.
And the world we're creating for future generations. All right. And speaking of exploring the past and its impact on the present, the final book in this seasoned but unavailable category is Somewhere Else by Jenny Diskey.
Okay.
She was actually born in America, but has lived in Scotland since 1971.
Wow.
And this is a generational tale about womanhood and Jewish Scottish experiences.
Interesting.
Across 2 major historical events.
Yeah.
The creation of Israel and the fall of the Berlin Wall.
That sounds like a sweeping epic that tackles themes of identity, displacement, the enduring power of history.
And it's worth noting that Diskey is a poet as well as a novelist.
Okay.
So I wonder if that will translate into a particularly lyrical or evocative prose style.
It's definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, sometimes that background in poetry can bring a unique rhythm and musicality to prose, which can make for a really immersive reading experience.
Absolutely.